responsible for facilitating community efforts to improve immigrants and refugees' successful integration into the Dayton community. Her work includes developing cross-sector strategies to increase Dayton's ability to be more immigrant-friendly and implementing a framework encouraging both native-born and foreign-born participation. Prior to joining the City of Dayton, Melissa gained national and international experience working on immigration issues. She lived and worked on the U.S.-Mexico border, where she researched human rights abuses and the immigration system. She also worked with the International Organization for Migration, where she was a part of a team that increased access to health care for Colombian refugees living in the northern border region of Ecuador. Melissa has a Master of Social Work and a Master of Public Health from New Mexico State University. At this time, we welcome Melissa.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank Tony for inviting me to come and speak about Welcome Dayton and the work that we're doing. Excuse me. First of all, I always kind of like to know how many people have heard of Welcome Dayton before. I know you haven't presented to you before. Anyone who has like never heard of it or think you might have heard of it but you're not really sure what it does? Great. Just kind of like to kind of see like, you know, where different people are in their room and everything. So Welcome Dayton is a community initiative that began back in 2011. And I think it's helpful to understand the structure of where Welcome Dayton sits within the City of Dayton as well. So we're a part of the Human Relations Council, which is an agency. So it reports directly to the City Commission, whereas all of the other city departments report to the city manager. And so the Human Relations Council, one of our core points of work is civil rights enforcement. So if someone has been discriminated against in the areas of housing, employment, credit, or public accommodation, we investigate and adjudicate cases. And really that part of that work is how Welcome Dayton started. Back in 2009 and 2010, the board of the HRC, Human Relations Council, was looking at discrimination, particularly in housing, and realized that unfortunately our immigrant community, particularly Latinos, as well as our African refugees, were being discriminated against when it came to housing issues. And so at that same time, some of our city leadership really noticed that, oh my gosh, Dayton has had a really large increase in our immigrant and refugee community. Between 2009 and 2013, it increased by almost 60%. So there's lots of positive things that are obviously happening when we have new populations coming in, new businesses started, houses being built, but also recognizing that those things will not continue or be sustainable if people are going to be discriminated against, aren't being treated fairly, or not don't have equitable access to services. And so really kind of looking at that juxtaposition, the city tasked a group of 5 people that was led by Tom Walrab, who was the former executive director of the HRC, to really start to look at what would it mean if we were to become a city that's intentionally immigrant friendly. So I think that a lot of other places, and particularly in Dayton as well, there's a lot of work that had already been done around integrating immigrants into the community, but that was really primarily in a lot of nonprofit sectors, a lot of churches, you know, the library, but it really wasn't something that the municipal government was thinking about, or how do we make sure that we're serving our immigrants appropriately in the community. And so what ended up happening that created Welcome Dayton was a series of community conversations. And so people came together to kind of answer that question specifically of what would it look like if we were intentionally immigrant friendly, what are the recommendations, what would we need to do, and excuse me, as a result of those community conversations, what was written is called the Welcome Dayton Plan. And so it specifically lays out kind of a framework for both the city as well as our community partners for things that we need to do in order to make sure that our immigrant and refugee population are successfully integrated into the community, so we can have these positive benefits of, you know, growing population and economic development, as well as that social diversity and cultural, you know, development that we have in our community. And so that was how the Welcome Dayton Plan was created. And so kind of like fast forward a little bit. So that was October of 2011 when that was officially adopted by the City Commission. And then in October 2012 is when I was hired as the first full-time employee. And so I'm just going to kind of share with you some of our accomplishments over the time, and then I know Tony had also asked that I speak about the Syrian refugees as well, so I'll share a little bit about that. But we have 5 focus areas of work that we look at for what we call immigrant integration. And so that's not just immigrants understanding the American culture and system, but also what we as the receiving community are doing to celebrate and reflect back that diversity that we have in the community. So our 5 focus areas are business and economic development, community, culture and the arts, education, government and justice, and health and social services. And I think it's really important that we have that holistic approach, that we look at these 5 different areas, because it's not just health and social services or making sure people have access, and it's not just that business and economic development piece to make sure that, we get all these economic benefits, but that it's really a holistic approach to integration. So some of our accomplishments that I'll share, one is a language access policy for the city of Dayton. So previously, if someone doesn't have English fluency and they come to the city to get services, well, they might bring their child out of school with them, or they might have to call a friend, or that city civil servant might be really frustrated. They don't know how to communicate with that person. But we now have a language access policy that includes telephonic, face-to-face interpretation, as well as written document translation. So those services are being provided. We've done training with all city departments. Our call centers have a press 1 for Spanish option, and so that's been in place since the end of 2014. We're continuing to try to increase that usage so that people have that equitable access to service, which is really, really important, because the language barrier is certainly one of the largest barriers that people face. Another accomplishment is that we hired 2 immigrant resource specialists, and they are immigrants themselves, and that's really helped us as far as building a stronger bridge and network within the immigrant and refugee community, as well as helping us understand more of the barriers that people face. And so they do a lot of individual case management and assistance and helping people navigate the system, but it really helps us identify kind of those systemic barriers that people face on an ongoing basis. So that's been really, really, really great, and we've been able to, so they were hired August of 2014 on a grant, and we're able to continue to piece together some funding for those positions that are really important to us. The third accomplishment is kind of a lot of accomplishments all at once, but we have a Welcome Dayton committee. Jan is also on our committee, but it's city commission appointed, and there's 27 members on it that are appointed, as well as 5 ex officio and staff members, so we're a little over 30 people. But we have 6 different subcommittees, including those 5 focus areas, and then our 6th subcommittee is the one that Jan is on, which is our Welcome Center subcommittee. So really looking again at how do we create stronger support and go deeper into the community. So each of those 5 subcommittees, excuse me, 6 subcommittees, it's a working committee, and I think that's really helped us grow our capacity and be more actively involved in the community. So one highlight out of those subcommittees that I'll mention is Welcome Belmont. And so this project specifically works at Belmont High School, where there's a very large ESOL, or English for Speakers of Other Languages, population. They have over 130 students at Belmont High School that whose first language is not English. And there have been a lot of, unfortunately, interethnic tensions at that school. The police have been involved there in the past, and that there's just been really some challenges as far as student integration, as you can imagine, at a high school. And so this pilot project has paired 10 immigrant students with 10 native-born students for the year to be what we call cultural collaborators. And so they have the opportunity for mutual learning to be paired together and learn about each other's culture, so that there's that mutual exchange happening. They do special projects together as well, ranging from, they've done a ropes course, they've gone to see the Nutcracker perform, they have some service projects together. And as a result of all of this, our kind of like goal was just that we just want people to be friends. And it's a very, very simple one, but in high school it's a really difficult one and challenging when people, when people appear to be so incredibly different. And so we're finding the similarities, but they're actually eating lunch together by their own choice. And to me, I think that really demonstrates the outcome that we were looking for. People are choosing to not let those high school barriers stand in their way of true friendship. So really excited about that. But again, all of the subcommittees are working on special projects and are really doing a lot, and we're really, really thankful to the work of the committee, because again, ranging from, it's just not enough for one person to be in charge of all of the work that's being done, but it also has really helped us increase the capacity and really be truly a community initiative. So I'm going to pause there, I guess, before I talk about refugee resettlement. Does anyone have any questions? I know I speak very quickly, and I do apologize for that.
You're great. I just was curious at Belmont, does it tend to be Hispanics? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, and I kind of jumped over that aspect. Dayton is incredibly diverse as far as our immigrant population.
But it seems like there's pockets.
Yeah,
like
so,
near Grandview, there's an African pocket, and then there's a Turkish pocket.
Right. So Belmont is really the only high school in the Dayton Public Schools that specifically has an ESOL program. So the other schools, students could certainly choose to go to them, but they wouldn't have that same type of support or environment. So basically all of the ESOL students are at Belmont. So it's very, very diverse in that respect. Other demographics, just to kind of give you guys an idea of how incredibly diverse it is, over 40 different countries are represented in the Dayton Public Schools, and over 30 different languages are spoken within the Dayton Public School system. So really, really diverse. We also look at naturalization statistics. One of our big initiatives this year is to get more people to become U.S. citizens, and we track naturalization statistics. In 1 year, we've had over 130 different countries represented at the naturalization ceremony that's at our U.S. Federal Courthouse downtown. So again, an incredibly diverse population. We can certainly talk about, well, which ones do we see the most of? Our largest population in Montgomery County is actually Indian, and then it would be Hispanic, primarily from Mexico. And so that Asian population, I think, people maybe sometimes don't really recognize or realize that it's actually even larger than our Hispanic community. We also have a really large African, primarily from Central and Eastern Africa, which a lot of that is attributed to our refugee resettlement program. Other countries that we see a lot of, kind of back to the Asian population, a lot from Vietnam, the Philippines. We also have, particularly within the city of Dayton, a larger Iraqi population. We have a larger and a growing Chinese population. And then we actually also have a very large European population as well. Sorry.
You want to finish?
Sure. So just really briefly about refugee resettlement. We have, the way that refugee resettlement works is that there's one, in the city of Dayton, there's one resettlement provider, and that's Catholic Social Services. So all of,
Say that again?
It's Catholic Social Services is the refugee resettlement provider. And so really the majority of the initial kind of decision process as far as who comes to the United States or who is resettled in Dayton is done through Catholic Social Services. And they are the ones that are responsible for finding a house, for that initial reception and placement period, so helping people enroll for public benefits, helping people become enrolled in education classes or looking for employment. Their focus is really on that initial 60 to 90 days. They do provide case management for up to 5 years, but the majority of the focus is that initial 60 to 90 days to try to get them settled as quickly as possible, and as their mission from the Office of Refugee Resettlement at the federal level is economic self-sufficiency, and so really looking at employment as quickly as possible.